One question that comes up a lot is, what exactly do Sea Org members do all day? You hear about people putting in 120 hours a week, working 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, no days off, no holidays, etc. What in the world could possibly keep people that busy for that amount of time? It's kind of a big answer that I'm going to try to give very quickly, so let's give it a shot. Hi everyone, welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. So what keeps Sea Org members so busy? The answer that I'm going to give here applies pretty much equally to Sea Org members and other Scientology staff members who are non-Sea Org members. And the difference is that the Sea Org members are the guys who have signed a commitment to work for the Scientology for the next billion years. It's a symbolic commitment, but in the minds of a Sea Org member, it's quite real. Those guys are the ones who are making $50 a week, working 120 hours a week. They live in church-owned properties. They eat church-provided meals. Sometimes the analogy gets made to the clergy of the Catholic Church or whatever. These are the guys who have dedicated their entire lives to working for Scientology. Now, non-Sea Org staff are people who essentially work for Scientology as a day job or as their night job. They live in the real world, they pay their own rent, they have cars, they can be on the internet, they can date or marry non-Scientologists if they want. They have lives. They also work for basically peanuts, but I'm just differentiating between Sea Org staff and non-Sea Org staff, and how the answer I'm gonna give pretty much applies to both. So to understand how a Church of Scientology is organized and how it operates, you kind of have to think of it as an extremely bloated and inefficient corporation. A regular corporation, sort of by necessity, evolves various efficiencies because of economic factors. But the Church of Scientology operates completely the opposite of all that because they have almost no overhead. Their operating costs are about as close to zero as an organization can get because they pay their staff essentially nothing, plus they're tax exempt, so they're not paying income tax or property tax. And this allows for massive inefficiency. So I'm mentioning that because I'm going to answer this question by describing the various functions that need to be performed within every Church of Scientology, but then you have to sort of allow for the fact that all of this is being done with remarkable inefficiency. Any Church of Scientology has a 9-division org board. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as a 7-division org board, but Division 6 has 3 divisions. It's 6A, 6B, and 6C, and each one of them is a division in its own right. So you have a 9-division org board. And no matter whether a Church of Scientology has 5 staff members or 200 staff members, all of the functions that are represented on the org board, the organizing board, it's basically just an org chart. All of these functions are expected to get done one way or another, regardless of how many staff members are there. So in Division 1, you have what in a traditional corporation would be considered HR. Whoever's posted as the head of Division 1 or within Division 1 is going to be working on things such as hiring staff, training staff, manning reception. Churches of Scientology have a dispatch system. It's basically a system of writing memos to each other and reports to each other and on each other. And somebody has the function of running these reports all around the organization. So that function is contained within Division 1. And within Division 1 is also where you have the ethics officer function. Anyone who's kind of been watching Scientology has heard of the famous ethics officer or getting ethics interviews. The people who do those interviews and wear that hat or perform that role of ethics officer are also located within Division 1. Again, for people who've been watching Scientology for a while, you've probably heard the term HCO, and that is simply the name of Division 1 is HCO, which stands for Hubbard Communications Office. And there's a historical reason why it's called that, but it just doesn't even matter. HCO is the name in Scientology for Division 1. In Division 2 of a Scientology organization, you have what in a normal corporation would just be called the Sales and Marketing Division. In a Church of Scientology, they call it the Dissemination Division. The main function that gets performed in the Dissemination Division in most churches of Scientology, because they don't have a lot of staff usually, is simply the function of registration. And registration is Scientology's word for sales. Even down just to the level of nomenclature where, like, say, a car sales lot or something, you might say, oh, the guy is in a sales interview. In a Church of Scientology, you would say he's in a reg interview, which is short for a registrar interview or a registration interview. So again, Dissemination Division, Division 2, you have registration as the primary function. Selling Scientology auditing and courses is the main thing that occurs in Division 2. Division 2 is also responsible for selling books. So when you walk into a Church of Scientology, normally the first thing you see is the reception desk, and then the next thing you see is a giant bookstore with e-meters and books and lectures. That is called the bookstore, and it's one of the departments in Division 2. The other function of Division 2 is sending out all of the promotional mailings, magazines, newsletters to promote various Scientology services. So if you receive mail from your local Church of Scientology, that is a function being performed out of Division 2. Moving on to Division 3. In a Church of Scientology, it is called the Treasury Division. In a normal corporation, it would probably just be called the Finance Division. The first function that is performed is basically receiving, collecting, and invoicing money. So Division 2 is where they sell you something and get you to agree to give your money. And then Division 3 is the one who receives your money and invoices it and keeps the accounts up to date. Division 3 is also responsible for paying all the bills of the organization, and it's responsible for keeping a record of all of the physical assets of the organization. Just think of a normal finance and accounting department, and that is what is supposed to be accomplished in Division 3. Division 4 is called the Technical Division. In a normal corporation, it would probably be called Production or Operations, and it is where most of the actual delivery of Scientology occurs. So you kind of get a sense of how these divisions tend to progress in the sequence that one might flow through the organization. So in Division 1, you're walking into the organization and you're meeting reception, who then sends you to Division 2, who sells you a service and takes your money. And they send you over to Division 3, where they actually invoice your money and keep your accounts up to date. And then they send you over to Division 4, who's now ready to deliver your course or your auditing sessions, and they're going to schedule you appropriately. The course room in a Church of Scientology is located within Division 4. The auditing rooms, the professional auditors in a Church of Scientology, those are all located in Division 4, and that is called the Technical Division. Normally, this is where the majority of the staff of any Church of Scientology are posted. These are the jobs that require the most people. Then you have Division 5, which in Scientology they call the Qualifications Division. In a normal company, they would probably call it Quality Control or Quality Assurance. And in a nutshell, Division 5's job is to make sure that Division 4 is doing its job correctly. You could also say Division 5's job is to make sure all of the other divisions are performing their functions correctly. It tends to, a lot of the times, just focus on making sure Division 4 is doing its job correctly. Then in Division 6, these are commonly referred to as the Division 6s because, like I said, there are 3 of them. And again, it also sort of flows in sequence here. The most important thing to understand about Division 6, or the 6s, is that their sole reason for existing is to bring completely brand new people into Scientology. The people who are posted in Division 6 are supposed to have personalities uniquely appropriate for dealing with brand new people. They're supposed to be, well, first off, they're supposed to be attractive. This is Scientology always putting its best foot forward when dealing with the WOG world. I guess you can't really blame them for that. When's the last time you saw an unattractive pharmaceutical rep? It just doesn't really happen. So they're supposed to be very outgoing. This is going to be a little controversial, but there is one policy that actually says they're not actually supposed to be very bright. And I'm sorry. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on people who were in Div 6, but there's this one policy, I swear to God, I will quote it if people are too upset about this. It was a policy that said if you have an organization and you have these staff and some of them are just not quite bright, that one of the positive aspects of someone who is not quite bright is they also don't really know when to give up. I'm not saying everyone in Div 6 is not bright. I'm saying if you have someone in the organization, people are like, what are we supposed to do with this dummy? Sometimes they go, we'll put him in Div 6. He won't know that all these people are trying to insult him when they're handing out promo. I don't know if I'm going to keep this in the video. That's kind of funny, but really it's only funny because L. Ron Hubbard did actually say that. They're supposed to be very outgoing, personable people who are not easily insulted or offended. Because if you're working in a Church of Scientology and you're dealing with raw public, which is the word they use for people who have had no prior exposure to Scientology, they can be very insulting and hostile, and you need people in Division 6 who don't really give a shit about that. So I guess one of the things that comes to mind is, the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses who are knocking on your door, who are used to having doors slammed in their faces 100 times a day. Perfect Div 6 personalities. And so the reason you have 3 different Division 6s is because the first Division 6, 6A, is specifically dedicated to making contact with brand new people. And then Division 6B is dedicated to servicing brand new people. So introductory services. If you walk into a Church of Scientology and you're like, hey, who are you guys? I want to find out more. They're going to sell you a very cheap short course, and they're going to put you into a course room. That is not the same course room where real Scientologists are doing real Scientology courses. The courses and the course rooms that exist in Division 4 are called major courses, and the courses in Division 6 are called minor courses or intro courses. And then Division 6C is responsible for activating current Scientologists to bring brand new people into Scientology. So you have all of these divisions that have all of these functions, and they're all supposed to be getting accomplished in one way, shape, or form to one degree or another, regardless of how many staff there are. Then, of course, you have Division 7, which is the executive division, which really just exists as somewhat of a redundancy to represent horizontally what is already otherwise represented vertically on a Scientology org board. So above these divisions 1 through 6 on the org board, you have echelons of management, and those various echelons are also represented down here at the lower level in Division 7. Now that you generally understand the functions of the org board as they're laid out from left to right, now you have untold layers of management above this point within your local organization, at the continental management level organization, at the middle management level organization, and at international management organization. It is just untold levels of redundant management units. And this is what I'm talking about when I refer to the massive inefficiencies. The vast majority of what occurs in the Sea Org is remarkably unnecessary and remarkably inefficient. And yet you have people spending 120 hours a week performing these various duties. If you're a Sea Org recruiter and you're in Division 1, or you're a non-Sea Org recruiter and you work at the local Tampa org, you are full-time trying to figure out and name and contact and interview people to join staff. And you might spend all week working on this and not get anybody to join staff. The less success you have getting people to join staff, the harder you are expected to be working on it. Like if you've succeeded in getting someone to join staff that week, you might not have to work 120 hours that week. So at a giant Sea Org organization like here in Clearwater at Flag, or the Flagland base, they have an awful lot of staff. So almost all of the different functions that exist on these org boards, by the way, my descriptions were limited to giving divisional descriptions, but within divisions you have departments, and within departments you have sections, and within sections you have units. And you can have several staff within a unit if the organization is big enough. And no matter what your post is in the Sea Org, you are doing that post 100 to 120 hours a week. And a lot of that time might be spent basically spinning your wheels, but it's what you're expected to be doing. You are expected to be productive at all times. You are expected to be actively engaged in some activity that on some level is related to whatever your statistic measures. So if your job is recruiter and your main product is someone who has started on staff in the Sea Org, you might spend your time putting lists together of prospects. You might spend your time walking around the organization looking for people to ask for names to put on your prospect list. You might spend time driving around trying to find the people on your prospect list. If you're lucky, you spend most of your time in an actual interview trying to convince somebody to join the Sea Org. Once somebody has signed their contract, You're going to be spending a lot of time getting them to put a list together of the things they need to do to arrange in their life to actually arrive in the Sea Org. This is just one example of a recruiter. Let's say you are an auditor in one of these organizations. Most of your time is supposed to be spent sitting down across from another person in your auditing room, actually delivering an auditing session. That's the only time you're actually safe. That's the only time you're actually considered to be doing your job. Now, after the auditing session, you have to spend a lot of time writing up the session and getting it ready to submit your folder into the case supervisor, who's going to review all your work and tell you you've done a good job and give you a pat on the head. But if you're an auditor and for some reason you don't happen to have anybody scheduled for an auditing session, and let's say all your auditing folders have already been completely written up and submitted, and let's say you've already completed any outstanding correction orders you might have been issued, you are not allowed to just sit around and do nothing. Now, keep in mind, as an auditor, it's not your job to go sell auditing to people. It is not your job to go schedule people who have already paid for auditing to actually take their auditing sessions. That's not your job. Your job is only supposed to be to deliver auditing. But no one gives a shit if the reason you don't have someone to audit is because everyone else hasn't done their job. Nobody gives a shit if the reason you don't have anyone to audit is because, God forbid, it happens to be Christmas week and all of the public have gone home to spend Christmas with their families. You are expected to find things to do that in some way, in some remote way, might contribute to possibly having somebody to audit. It's just this mindset that gets instilled within a Church of Scientology, within the Sea Org, within staff members, that you are to be busy and productive at all times. When things are slow is when you are expected to find the most busy work, even though there's no actual productive work to do. And let's say your job is in management, some sort of supervisor capacity, international management, middle management. David Miscavige from his organization in RTC, which sits above international management, are constantly issuing tons of programs that need to be executed in each Church of Scientology. And a program is something that is published in written form, and they are issued and distributed to all the staff members. And a lot of these management positions are responsible for taking these programs and making sure all of the staff members are executing these programs. This is an example of something that within Scientology, Scientologists think these programs make perfect sense and are a great way to run an organization. And in the real world, it is pure fucking chaos, because these programs are issued from different levels of organizations. And these programs are assigned to staff members called programs operators, who are staffed in senior level organizations, and their job is to get people in the junior organizations to get these actions done. But the thing is, the people in these lower level organizations already have 2, 3, or 4 people in their own organization who they are supposed to be taking orders and directions from. And then they end up getting orders from this upper level organization about this program and this upper level organization about that program. And it becomes pure fucking chaos. And churches of Scientology do not operate very well at all. But because they have so many statistics that they measure, and because everyone's always watching statistics and they're always caring about statistics, they feel like they're very busy and they feel like they're very effective. And every time that stat goes up a little bit, they take a win and they feel good and they think they're accomplishing the mission of Scientology and making the world a better place. But it really ends up being a lot of wheels spinning and not a lot of things getting done. And I think the ultimate proof of that is that Scientology is probably 70% smaller today than it was in 1993 or 1996. You have all these people working very hard and getting almost nothing done. I'm not sure I've really covered everything I wanted to say on this video, but I also don't want to make it very long. And I think I've probably delivered the main point that I wanted to make, which was just explaining the functions that exist within a Scientology organization, showing how they compare to a real world corporation. And so hopefully giving some idea of what it is staff members and Sea Org members actually spend all of these hours working on. If you're watching this video and you have some specific question about something I have not addressed, put it down in the comments and I'll try to take it up in a later video. All right, that's it for now, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, is you gonna want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, oh, Yankee Mama, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.